Let's talk about type conversion. Sometimes you may have a string with an integer inside it, or an integer that you want to put in a string. Let's take a look at demo. So I'll create string with integer in it. We start by double quotes. I'll type 2. We enclose it with double quotes. Press return, you get 2. Now it's an integer value within the string. And if we check the type of 2, and it becomes string. It's an integer value, but we're still getting a type as string. So what is the use case for this? Sometimes you may have a string with an integer inside it, or an integer that you want to put in a string. The first scenario often happens when the user input where everything is returned inside a string. To be able to use it, we need to convert it to the desired data type. Python allows you to convert string type values to integer type values and vice versa. Using the built-in str function, you can convert an integer to string. Okay, so let's take a look at the demo. I'm going to start by typing str, which is a function. We're going to have to use parentheses, and I type some number within parentheses. So I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, and I close that with the parentheses, and I press return. Now this time it returns 1, 2, 3, 4, but it encloses that 1, 2, 3, 4 within single quotes, which makes it a type of string. So we use str to convert a number into a string. So we're going to store that into a variable. So we create a variable a, I'll say equal to, and I use str method or function, and I'll use 1, 2, 3, 4, and now I'm going to press return. Now if I check the type of a, so use type function, use parentheses and pass in a, and press return. Now that returns str. So we successfully converted integer into string using str method. Strings can also be converted to integers as long as they hold a valid integer value within. This is done by using the built-in int function. Let's take a look. So we create int and then we pass in some string in it. So I use double quotes and I press 100 double quotes and parentheses. I press return and that returns 100. Now this is type integer. How do we check that? We can create a variable. We set that equal to int double quotes 100 and then press return. And now if I check type b, it returns integer type. So you can see we converted 100 into integer using built-in int function. Now what if I try to convert some string which is not a valid integer? What happens? So let's take a look. So if I type int and I use foobar and I press return, it's going to throw an error. It says invalid literal for int method with base 10 foobar. Okay, that's because this is not a number, it's not an integer, so it cannot be converted. So if a string hold non-integer value, it will throw an error. It will not convert that into an integer. We can take a look at the float as well. So if I type int and then here I'll type 3 dot blah, and then I try to convert that into integer, it will not convert because it's an invalid literal. It's not an integer, it's a float. To convert float string into a float value, you can use float method, and then within double quotes we type some float value like 3 dot blah, and then I press return. That returns the float value. So this is how you can convert a float string into a float. Now we learned how we can create variables. Let's talk about how we can delete variable from the memory. We can do that by using del keyword. So we create a variable x equal to, and I use an expression to multiply 5 plus 15. I press return and x has a value of 25 now. So I want to get rid of x. Now if I use a print function and I use x within the parentheses I return 25. Okay, that's basically printing out to your shell. Now what if I try to type X and press return? It will return 25 because X exists in a memory. It's a location in a memory which grabs me the value stored in it. But what if I delete this? So I'll use del keyword space and X and I press return. Now that memory location X is gone from the memory. If I try to print it by using print function and I put in X in the parentheses, press return, that is going to throw an error. It says name X is not defined. That's an error, name error. That's alright. Now what if I use X equal to, for example, John? Okay, now I try to print X, press return, and that returns John as well. So X is again back in the memory. Now you know how you can delete variables from a memory using del keyword. You can also assign the resulting value of another operation to a variable. So let's create a variable. We name it first name and we set that equal to, for example, David. A first name has a value of David now. I would like to create another variable called last name equal to, we say John. Okay, now if I want to print first name and last name together, we can do that by using plus operator. So I will create a name variable equal to, and within the expression I can use a variable. So I'll say first name plus last name. I press return. Now let's see what's the value within a name. I'll type name and press return. Now it has David Johns. Obviously there is no space here, so we can override the value of a first name and have a space at the last. So I'll type first name equal to David and I leave a space and then enclose that with double quotes. Return. And now if I say name equal to first name plus last name, I press return, and now we'll print the value within the name. So we start print name and then press return. Now it gives me David Johns. As you can see, you can use plus operator on strings as well. And first name is basically a variable or memory location which holds the value of David. A last name holds the value of John. So when we print this, we get David Johns. Now this is an expression, and within the expression we can use a variable and their values will be used when they get evaluated. So we can use print and then I can do first name here plus last name right in the print method. I press return and it gives me David Johns. I'm going to clear the terminal by pressing Ctrl L. Now I'm going to show you another operation that you can do to print out same string multiple times using asterisk or multiplication operator. So if I create a message variable, I set that equal to a string I love Python. Okay, I press return and the message has I love Python now. Now what if I want to print it 10 times or 5 times? So I'll use the print method. I'll say please go ahead and get the value of a message which is I love Python and then multiply it by 10 and then close the parentheses. Now if I press return, it is going to print I love Python 10 times. Another concept which I want to explain to you is that a variable can hold a value of another variable. So let's clear the terminal. We use x variable equal to 50 and I use a y variable equal to x. Now if I press x and press return, that gives me 50, but if I press y and press return, that gives me 50 also. Now the y is actually going to look for this memory location which has a value of 50 and it returns 50. Now let's talk about multiple assignment. In Python, you can also assign multiple variables in one statement. For example, if I have a, comma b, comma c, now we're creating 3 variables. If I use an assignment operator and I say 1, 2, 3, I press return, we actually created 3 variables, variable a, b, and c. Now a was basically set the value of 1, and then b has a value of 2, and c has 3. Let's verify that. So if I type a and press return, I get a as 1. I type b, press return, I get the value of b, which is 2, and I c, which will be 3. Next question is, what happens if we try to assign more variables than we pass the values? Let's take a look at the demo. So if I say x, comma, y, comma, z equal to 1, 2. Now we're using 3 variables, but we are only passing 2 values. And if I press return, that's going to throw an error. It says value error, not enough values to unpack, expected 3 but got 2. So it's exactly telling me that I expected 3 values but got 2. So that's going to throw an error called value error. So you make sure that when you're using multiple assignment, you use the same number of variables or values.